rub you down. They climbed out through the ropes, and Hogan came over to me. John Collins is out with a couple friends to see Jack, I said. I saw them come up in the car. Who are the two fellows with John? They're what you call wise boys, Hogan said. Don't you know them two? No, I said. That's Happy Steinfeld and Lou Morgan. They've got a pool room. I've been away a long time, I said. Sure, said Hogan. That Happy Steinfeld's a big operator. I've heard his name, I said. He's a pretty smooth boy, Hogan said. They're a couple of sharpshooters. Well, I said, they want to see us in half an hour. You mean they don't want to see us until a half an hour? That's it. Come on into office, Hogan said. To hell with those sharpshooters. About 30 minutes or so, Hogan and I went upstairs. We knocked on Jack's door. We were talking inside the room. Wait a minute, somebody said. To hell with that stuff, Hogan said. When you want to see me, I'm down in the office. We heard the door unlock. Steinfeld opened it. Come in, Hogan, he says. We're all going to have a drink. Well, says Hogan, that's something. We went in. Jack was sitting on the bed. John and Morgan were sitting in a couple of chairs. Steinfeld was standing up. You're a pretty mysterious lot of boys, Hogan said. Hello, Danny, John says. Hello, Danny, Morgan says and shakes hands. Jack doesn't say anything. He just kind of sits there on the bed. He ain't with the others. He's all by himself. He's wearing an old blue jersey and pants and had on boxing shorts. He needed a shave. Steinfeld and Morgan were dressers, and John was quite a dresser, too. Jack sat there looking Irish and tough. Hello. Steinfeld brought out a bottle, and Hogan brought in some glasses, and everybody had a drink. Jack and I took one, and the rest of them went on, and had 2 or 3 each. Better save some for your ride back, Hogan said. Don't worry, we got plenty, Morgan said. Jack hadn't drunk anything since the one drink. He was standing up and looking at them. Morgan was sitting in on the bed where Jack had sat. Have a drink, Jack, John said as he handed him a glass and a bottle. No, Jack said, I never like to go to these wakes. They all laughed. Jack didn't laugh. They were feeling pretty good when they left. Jack stood on the porch when they got into the car. They waved at him. So long, Jack said. We had supper. Jack didn't say anything at all during this meal except, will you pass me this, or will you pass me that? 2 health farm patients ate at the same table with us. They were pretty nice fellows when we finished eating. We went out on the porch. It was dark early. I like to take a walk, Jerry, Jack asked. Sure, I agreed. We put on our coats and started out. It was quite a way down to the main road, and then we walked along the main road about 1.5 miles. Cars kept going by, and we would pull out to the side until they went past. Jack didn't say anything. After we had stepped out to the bushes to let a big car go by, Jack said, to hell with this walking. Come on back to Hogan's. We went along the side road that cut up over the hill and cut across the fields back to Hogan's. We could see the lights of the houses on the hill. We came along the front to the house, and there was standing in the driveway was Hogan. Have a good walk? Hogan asked. Oh, fine, Jack said. Listen, Hogan, have you got any liquor? Sure, says Hogan. What's the idea? Send it up to the room, Jack says. I'm going to sleep tonight. You're the doctor, Hogan says. Come on up to the room, Jerry, Jack says. Upstairs, Jack sat. To life, Jack says. Hogan bought a quart of liquor and 2 glasses. Want some ginger ale? What do you think I want to do, get sick? I just asked you, said Hogan. Have a drink, said Jack. No thanks, said Hogan, and he went out. How about you, Jerry? I'll have one with you, I said. Jack poured out a couple of drinks. Now, he said, I want to take it slow and easy. Put some water in it, I said. Yes, Jack said, I guess that's better. Rona! Jack started to pour me another. No, I said, that's all I want. Alright, Jack said. He poured himself out another big shot and put water in it. He was lighting up a little. That was a fine bunch out here this afternoon, he said. They don't take any chances, those two. Then a little later, well, he says, they're right. What the hell's the good in taking chances? Don't you want another, Jerry? He said. Come on, drink along with me. I don't need it, Jack, I said. I feel alright. Just have one more, Jack said. It was softening him up. Alright, I said. Jack poured one for me and another big one for himself. You know, he said, I like liquor pretty well. If I hadn't been boxing, I would have drunk quite a lot. Sure, I said. You know, he said, I messed a lot boxing. You made plenty of money. Sure, that's what I'm after. You know, I miss a lot, Jerry. How do you mean? Well, he says, like about the wife. Being away from home so much. It don't do my girls any good. Who's your old man? Some of these society kids will say to them. My old man's Jack Brennan. That don't do them any good. Hell, I said. All that makes a difference is if they've got dough. Well, says Jack, I've got dough for them, all right. He pours out another drink. The bottle was almost empty. Put some water in it, I said. Jack poured in some water. Yeah, no, he says. You ain't got no idea how I miss the wife. Sure, you ain't got any idea. You can't have an idea what it's like. I ought to be better out in the country than in town. With me now, Jack said. It don't make any difference where I am. You can't have an idea what it's like. Have another drink. Am I getting soused? Do I talk funny? You're coming on, all right. You can't have any idea what it's like. There ain't anybody can have an idea what it's like. Except the wife, I said. She knows, Jack said. She knows, all right. She knows, you bet she knows. Put some water in that, I said. Jerry, says Jack, you can't have an idea what it gets to be like. He was good and drunk. He was looking at me steady. His eyes were sort of too steady. You'll sleep all right, I said. Listen, Jerry, Jack says. You want to make some money? Get some money down on Walcott. Yes? Listen, Jerry, Jack put down the glass. I'm not drunk now, you see. You know what I'm betting on him? 50 grand. That's a lot of dough. 50 grand, Jack says, at 2 to 1. I'll get 25,000 bucks. Get some money on him, Jerry. That sounds good, I said. How can I beat him, Jack says. It ain't crooked. How can I beat him? Why not make money on it? Put some water in that, I said. I'm through after this fight, Jack says. I'm through with it. I gotta take a beating. Why shouldn't I make money on it? Sure. I ain't slept for a week, Jack says. All night I lay awake and worry my can off. I can't sleep, Jerry. You ain't got an idea what it's like when you can't sleep. Sure. I can't sleep, that's all. I just can't sleep. What's the use of taking care of yourself all these years when you can't sleep? It's bad. You ain't got an idea what it's like, Jerry, when you can't sleep. Put some water in that, I said. Well, about 11 o'clock, Jack passes out, and I put him to bed. Finally, he can't keep from sleeping. I helped him get his clothes off and got him to bed. You'll sleep all right, Jack, I said. Sure, Jack says. I'll sleep now. Good night, Jack, I says. Good night, Jerry. Jack says, you're the only friend I got. Oh, hell, I say. You're the only friend I got, Jack says. The only friend I got. Go to sleep, I say. I'll sleep, Jack says. Downstairs, Hogan was sitting at the desk in the office reading his papers. He looked up. Well, you get your boyfriend to sleep, he asks. He's off. Better for him than not sleeping, Hogan said. Sure. You'd have a hell of a time explaining that these are the sports writers, though. Well, I'm going to bed myself, I said. Good night, said Hogan. In the morning, I came downstairs about 8 o'clock and got some breakfast. Hogan had his 2 customers out in the barn doing exercises. I went out and watched them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hogan was counting for them. Hello, Jerry, he said. Is Jack up yet? No, he's still sleeping. I went back to my room and packed up to go into town. About 9:30, I heard Jack getting up in the next room. When I heard him go downstairs, I went down after him. Jack was sitting at the breakfast table. Hogan had come in and was standing beside the table. How do you feel, Jack? I asked him. Not so bad. Sleep well? Hogan asked. I slept all right, Jack said. I got a thick tongue, but it ain't got a head. Good, said Hogan. That was good liquor. Put it on the bill, Jack said. What time you want to go into town? Hogan asked. Before lunch, Jack said. The 11 o'clock train. Sit down, Jerry, Jack said. Hogan went out. I sat down at the table. Jack was eating a grapefruit. When he'd find a seat, he'd spit it out into a spoon and dump it on the plate. I guess I was pretty stewed last night, he started. You drank some liquor. I guess I said a lot of fool things. You weren't bad. Where's Hogan? He asked. He was through with the grapefruit. He's out in front of the office. What did I say about betting on the fight? Jack asked. He was holding up a spoon and sort of poking at the grapefruit with it. The girl came in with some ham and eggs and took away the grapefruit. Bring me another glass of milk, Jack said to her. She went out. You said you had 50 grand on Walcott, I said. That's right, Jack said. That's a lot of money. I don't feel too good about it, Jack said. Something might happen? No, Jack said. He wants the title bad. He'll be shooting with him, all right. You can't ever tell. No, he wants the title. It's worth a lot of money to him. 50 grand is a lot of money, I said. It's business, said Jan. I can't win. You know I can't anyway. As long as you're in there, you've got a chance. No, Jack says. I'm all through. It's just business. How do you feel? Pretty good, said Jack. The sleep was what I needed. You might go good. I'll give him a good show, Jack said. After business, Jack called up his wife on the long distance. He was inside the booth telephoning. It was the first time he's called her since he's out here, Hogan said. He writes her every day. Sure, Hogan says. A letter only costs 2 cents. Hogan said goodbye to us. And Bruce, asshole ass, wrote this in here. Just wrote this in here. Bruce, the rubber, drove us down the train in the cart. Goodbye, Mr. Brennan, Bruce said at the train. I sure hope you knock his can off. So long, Jack said. He gave Bruce $2. Bruce had worked on him a lot. He looked kind of disappointed. Jack saw me and looking at Bruce holding the $2. It's all in the bill, he said. Hogan charged me for the rub. On the train going into town, Jack didn't talk. He sat in the corner of the seat with his ticket in his hand and looked out the window. Once he turned and spoke to me. I told the wife I'd take a room by Shelby tonight, he said. It's just around the corner from the garden. I can go up to the house tomorrow morning. That's a good idea, I said. Your wife ever see you fight, Jack? No, Jack says. She's never seen me fight. I thought he must be figuring on taking an awful beating if he doesn't want to go home afterward. In town, we took a taxi up to the Shelby. A boy came out and took our bags, and we went up to the desk. How much are the rooms? Jack asked. We only have double rooms, the clerk says. I can't give you a nice double room for $10. That's too steep. I can give you a double room for $7. With a bath? Certainly. You might as well bunk with me, Jerry, Jack says. Oh, I said, I'll sleep down in my brother-in-law's. I don't mean for you to pay for it, Jack says. I just want to get my money's worth. Will you register, please? The clerk says. He looked at the names. Number 238, Mr. Brennan. We went up in the elevator. It was a nice big room with 2 beds, a door opening into the back room. This is pretty good, Jack says. The boy who brought us up piled up the curtains and brought up our bags. Jack didn't make any move, so I gave the boy a quarter. We washed up and Jack said, "We'd better go out and get something to eat." We ate lunch at Jimmy Hemingway's place. Quite a lot of the boys were eating there. When we were about halfway through eating, John came in and sat down with us. Jack didn't talk too much. "How were you on the weight, Jack?" John asked him. Jack was putting away a pretty good lunch. "I could make it with my clothes on," Jack said. He never had to worry about taking off weight. He was a natural welterweight and he'd never gotten fat. He'd lost weight out at Hogan's. "Well, that's one thing you've never had to worry about," John said. "That's one thing," Jack says. We went around to the gardens to weigh in after lunch. The match was made at 147 pounds at 3 o'clock. Jack stepped onto the scales with a towel around him. The bar didn't move. Walcott had just weighed and was standing with a lot of people around him. "Let's see what you weigh, Jack," Freeman, Walcott's manager, said. "All right, weigh him then." Jack jerked his head toward Walcott. "Drop the towel," Freeman said. "What do you make it?" Jack asked the fellows who were weighing. 143 pounds, the fat man who was weighing said. "You're down fine, Jack," Freeman says. "Weigh him," Jack says. Walcott came over. He was blond with wide shoulders and arms like a heavyweight. He didn't have much legs. Jack stood about half a head taller than he did. "Hello, Jack," he said. His face was plenty marked up. "Hello," said Jack. "How do you feel?" "Good," Walcott says. He dropped the towel from around his waist and stood at the scales. He had the widest shoulders and back you ever saw. 146 pounds and 12 ounces. Walcott stepped off and grinned at Jack. "Well," John says to him, "Jack's spotted you about 4 pounds. "More than that when I come in, kid," Walcott says. "I'm going to go and eat now." We went back and Jack got dressed. "He's a pretty tough-looking boy," Jack says to me. "He looks as though he'd been hit plenty of times." "Oh, yes," Jack says. "He ain't hard to hit." "Where are you going?" John asked when Jack was dressed. "Back to the hotel," Jack says. "You look after everything?" "Yes," John says. "It's all looked after." "I'm going to lie down a while," Jack says. "I'll come around for you about 6:45 and we'll go and eat." "All right." Up at the hotel, Jack took off his shoes and his coat and lay down for a while. I wrote a letter. I looked over a couple of times and Jack wasn't sleeping. He was lying perfectly still, but every once in a while his eyes would open. Finally, he sits up. "Want to play some cribbage, Gary?" he asked. "Sure," I said. We went over to his suitcase and got out the cards and the cribbage board. He played cribbage and he won $3 off me. John knocked at the door and came in. "Want to play some cribbage, John?" Jack asked him. Jack put his hand down on the table. It was all wet. His coat was wet too. "Is it raining?" Jack asked. "It's pouring," John said. The taxi I had got tied up in on the traffic and got out and walked. "Come on, play cribbage," Jack says. "You ought to go and eat." "No," says Jack, "I don't want to eat yet." So they played cribbage for about half an hour and Jack won $1.50 off him. "Well, I suppose we got to eat," Jack says. He went to the window and looked out. "Is it still raining?" "Yes." "Let's eat in the hotel," John says. "All right," Jack says. "I'll play you once more to see who pays for the meal." After a little while, Jack gets up and says, "You buy the meal, John," and went downstairs and ate in the big dining room. After a while, we went upstairs and Jack played cribbage with John again and won $2.50 off him. Jack was feeling pretty good. John had a bag with him with all his stuff in it. Jack took off his shirt and collar and put on a jersey and a sweater, so he couldn't catch a cold when he came out, and put his ring clothes and his bathrobe in a bag. "You all ready?" John asked him. "I'll call up and have them get a taxi." Pretty soon the telephone rang and they said the taxi was waiting. We rode down to the elevator and went out through the lobby, and got into a taxi and rode around to the garden. It was raining hard, but there were a lot of people outside in the streets. The garden was sold out. As we came in on our way to the dressing room, I saw how full it was. It looked like half a mile down to the ring. It was dark, just the lights over the ring. It's a good thing with this rain they didn't try and pull this fight in the ballpark, John said. They got a good crowd, Jack says. This is a fight that would draw a lot more attention than the garden could hold. You can't tell about the weather, Jack says. John came to the door of the dressing room and poked his head in. Jack was sitting there in his bathrobe on. He had his arms folded and was looking at the floor. John had a couple of handlers with him. They were looking over his shoulder. Jack looked up. "Is he in?" he asked. "He's just gone down," John said. He started down. Walcott was just getting into the ring. The crowd gave him a big hand. He clapped through between the ropes and put his two fists together and smiled and shook them at the crowd. First at one side of the ring, then at the other, and then sat down. Jack got a good hand coming down through the crowd. Jack is Irish, and the Irish always get a pretty good hand. An Irishman don't draw in New York like a Jew or an Italian, but they always get a good hand. Jack climbed up and bent down through the ropes, and Walcott came over from his corner and pushed the rope down for Jack to go through. The crowd thought that was wonderful. Walcott put his hand on Jack's shoulder, and they stood there for a second. "So you're going to be one of these popular champions," Jack says to him. "Take your goddamn hand off my shoulder." "Be yourself," Walcott says. This is all great for the crowd, how gentlemanly the boys are before the fight, how they wish each other luck. Sully Friedman came over to the corner while Jack is bandaging his hands and John is over in Walcott's corner. Jack puts his thumb through the slit in the bandage, then wrapped his hand nice and smooth. I taped it around the wrists and twice across the knuckles. "Hey," Friedman says, "where did you get all that tape?" "Feel of it," Jack says. "It's soft, ain't it? Don't be a hick." Friedman stands there the time while Jack bandages the other hand. The two of the other boys that's going to handle him brings the gloves, and I pull one of them and work them around. "Say, Friedman," Jack asks, "what nationality is this? Walcott?" "Oh no," Sully says. "He's some sort of Dane." "He's a Bohemian," said the lad who brought the gloves in. The referee called them into the corner of the ring, and Jack walks out. Walcott comes out smiling. They met, and the referee put his arm on each of their shoulders. "Hello, popularity," Jack says to Walcott. "Be yourself." "What do you call yourself Walcott for?" Jack says. "Didn't you know he was a black guy?" "Listen," says the referee, and he gives him the same old line. Once Walcott interrupts him, he grabs Jack's arm and says, "Can I hit when he's got me like this?" "Keep your hands off me," Jack says. "There ain't no moving pictures of this." They went back to their corners. I lifted the bathrobe off Jack, and he leaned on the ropes and flexed his knees a couple of times. He scuffed his shoes in the rosin. The gong rang, and Jack turned quick and went out. Walcott came toward him, and they touched gloves. And as soon as Walcott dropped his hands, Jack jumped his left into his face twice. There wasn't anybody ever boxed better than Jack. Walcott was after him, going forward all the time with chin on his chest. He's a hooker, and he carries his hands pretty low. All he knows is to get in there and sock. But every time he gets in there close, Jack has a left hand in his face. It's just as though it's automatic. Jack just raises his left hand up, and it's in Walcott's face. 3 or 4 times Jack brings the right over, but Walcott gets it on the shoulder, high up on the head. He's like all these other hookers. The only thing he's afraid of is another one of his kind. He's covered everywhere you can hurt him. He don't care about your left hand in his face. After about 4 rounds, Jack has him bleeding bad, and he has his face all cut up, but every time Walcott's got him close, he's got socked so hard, he's got 2 red patches on both sides just below Jack's ribs. Every time he gets in close, Jack tries him up, then gets one hand loose and uppercuts him, but when Walcott gets his hand loose, he socks Jack in the body so he can hear the outside on the street. He's a socker. It goes along like that for 3 rounds more. They don't talk any. They're working all the time. We worked over Jack plenty too in between the rounds. He don't look good at all, but he never does much work in the ring. He don't move around much, and that left hand is just automatic. It's just like it was connected with Walcott's face, and Jack just had to wish it on every time. Jack is always calm and close, and he doesn't waste any juice. He knows everything about working in close too. He's getting away with a lot of stuff. While they were out in the corner, I watched him tie Walcott up, get his right hand loose, turn it, and come up with an uppercut that got Walcott's nose. They got Walcott's nose with the heel of the glove. Walcott was bleeding bad, and Tooth leaned some of his nose on Jack's shoulders just to get Jack some of it. And Jack sort of lifted his shoulder sharp enough to catch him against the nose, and that brought down the right hand in the way that same thing again. Walcott was sore as hell. By the time they got 5 rounds, he hated Jack's guts. Jack wasn't sore, that is, he wasn't any sorer than he always was. He certainly did use to make the fellows he fought hate boxing. That's why they hated Kid Lewis so. He never got Kid Lewis's goat. Kid Lewis always had about 3 new dirty things Jack couldn't do. Jack was as safe as a church all the time he was in there, as long as he was strong. He currently was treating Walcott rough. The funny thing was it all looked as though Jack was an open classic boxer. That was because he had all that stuff too. After the 7th round, Jack says, "My left's getting heavy." From then, he started to take a beating. It didn't show at first, but instead of him running the fight, it was Walcott was running it. Instead of being safe all the time now, he was in trouble. He couldn't keep him out with the left hand now. It looked as though it was the same as ever, only now instead of Walcott's punches just missing him, they were just hitting him. He took an awful beating in the body. "What's the round, Jack asked, the 11th. I can't say my legs are going." Yeah, he went 11 rounds and he's just now saying his legs are going bad. But Walcott had just been hitting him for a long time. I was like a baseball catcher who pulls the ball and takes some of the shock off. From now on, Walcott commenced to land solid. He certainly was a socking machine. Jack was just trying to block everything now. It didn't show what an awful beating he was taking. In between the rounds, I worked on his legs. The muscles would flutter under my hands all the time. I was rubbing on them. He was sick as hell. "How's it go?" he asked John, turning around, his face all swollen. "It's his fight." "I think I can last," Jack says. "I don't want this bohunk to stop me." It was going just the way he thought it would. He knew he couldn't beat Walcott. He wasn't as strong anymore. He was alright though. His money was alright now. He wanted to finish it off right just to please himself. He didn't want to be knocked out. The gong rang and we pushed him out. He went out slow. Walcott came out right after him. Jack put the left in his face, and Walcott took it, came in under it, and started working on Jack's body. Jack tried to tie him up and was just like trying to hold a buzzsaw. Jack broke away from it and missed with the right. Walcott clipped him with the left hook and Jack went down. He went down on his hands and knees and looked at us. The referee started counting. Jack was watching us and shaking his head. At 8, John motioned to him. You couldn't hear on account of the crowd. Jack got up. The referee had been holding Walcott back with one arm while he counted. When Jack was on his feet, Walcott started toward him. "Watch yourself, Jimmy," I heard Sully Friedman. "Watch yourself, Jimmy," I heard Sully Friedman yell to him. Walcott came up to Jack looking at him. Jack stuck the left hand at him. Walcott just shook his head. He backed Jack up against the ropes, measured him, and then hooked the left very light to the side of Jack's head, and socked the right into the body as hard as he could sock, just as low as he could get it. He must have hit him 5 inches below the belt. I thought the eyes would come out of Jack's head. They stuck way out. His mouth came open. The referee grabbed Walcott. Jack stepped forward. If you went down, there would be $50,000. He walked as though all his insides were going to fall out. He wasn't low, he said. It was an accident. The crowd were yelling so he couldn't hear anything. I'm all right, Jack says. They went right in front of us. The referee looks at John and then shakes his head. Come on, you paloke son of a bitch, Jack says to Walcott. John was hanging on to the ropes. He had his towel ready to chuck in. Jack was standing just a little way out from the ropes. He took a step forward. I saw the sweat come out from his face like somebody had squeezed it, and a big drop went down his nose. Come on and fight, Jack says to Walcott. The referee looked at John and waved Walcott on. Go in there, you slob, he says. Walcott went in. He didn't know what to do either. He never thought Jack could have stood it. Jack put the left on his face. There was such a hell of a lot of yelling going on. They were right in front of us. Walcott hit him twice. Jack's face was the worst I ever saw. The look on it. He was holding himself and all his body together, and it all showed on his face. All the time he was thinking about holding his body in there when it was busted. Then he started to sock. His face looked awful all the time. He started to sock with his hands low down by his side, swinging at Walcott. Walcott covered up and Jack was swinging wild at Walcott's head. Then he swung the left and it hit Walcott in the groin, and the right hit Walcott right bang where he'd hit Jack, way below the belt. Walcott went down and grabbed himself there and rolled and twisted around. The referee grabbed Jack and pushed him towards his corner. John jumps into the ring. There was all this yelling going on. The referee was talking with one of the judges, and the announcer got into the ring on the megaphone and says, Walcott's on a foul. The referee is talking to John and he says, what can I do? Jack wouldn't take the foul. Then when he's groggy, he fouls him. He'd lost it anyway, John says. Jack's sitting on the chair. I've got his gloves off, and he's holding himself down there with both hands. When he's got something supporting his face, he doesn't look so bad. Go over and say you're sorry, John says to him. It'll look good. Jack stands up and sweat comes out all over his face. I put the bathrobe around him, and he holds himself in with one hand under the bathrobe and goes across the ring. They've picked Walcott up and they're working on him. There are a lot of people in Walcott's corner. Nobody speaks to Jack. He leans over to Walcott. I'm sorry, Jack says. I didn't mean to foul you. Walcott doesn't say anything. He looks too damn sick. Well, you're champion now, Jack says to him. I hope you get a hell of a lot of fun out of it. Leave the kid alone, Sully Friedman says. Hello, Sully, Jack says. I'm sorry I fouled your boy. Friedman just looks at him. Jack went into his corner walking that funny jerky way, and we got him down through the ropes and through the reporter's table and out the aisle. A lot of people want to slap Jack on the back. He goes out through all that mob in his bathrobe into the dressing room. It's a popular win for Walcott. That way, the money was a bet in the garden. Once we got inside the dressing room, Jack lay down and shut his eyes. We want to get to the hotel and get a doctor, John says. I'm all busted inside, Jack says. I'm sorry as hell, Jack, John says. It's all right, Jack says. He lies there with his eyes shut. They certainly tried a nice double cross, John says. Your friends Morgan and Steinfield, Jack said. You got nice friends. He lies there, his eyes open now. His face still has that awful drawn look. It's funny how fast you can think when it means that much money, Jack says. You're some boy, Jack, John says. No, Jack says, it was nothing. That was 50 grand. Or I guess 75 grand. Is the mode different on this one? Well, I just am now looking at that. That's dope. Okay. Yes. You win. Hemingway's against the world. Yeah. In the building. Oh snap, we need another one. I can't even, oh I can check, my phone just stopped staying pulled up when it hit 5%, I think. Why is this saying that it's not streaming now? What the hell? I've been live this whole time and it just like stopped randomly at some point. I don't know what's going on here. Ah, okay, we are still live. We are still live. I lost a subscriber. Whack. Very whack indeed. Yes, I'm gonna be like, don't watch continue because I'm probably gonna delete this afterward anyway. Nah, screw that. I think I actually did a good reading. But shouts out. Yo, we doing Hemingway and Tekken. One more story, I guess. We got one more story and it's against the world. What do you think? You want to read The Killers? Or you want to read something else? Yeah, that's 10 pages. It's a solid 10, 11 pages and it's a good story. So. Oh man. The Killers. Hemingway. Turn up, turn up, turn up. Oh man, I think I'm gonna try and share this one more time. For the one time. One time for the one time. Oh, come on, load. Don't be slow. Yes, we're reading The Killers. Yes. Hemingway, Cancer Gang, turn up. The door of Henry's lunchroom opened and two men came in. They sat down at the counter. What's yours? George asked him. I don't know, one of the men says. What do you want to eat, Al? I don't know, said Al. I don't know what I want to eat. Outside it was getting dark. The streetlight came outside the window. The two men around the counter read the menu. From the other end of the counter, Nick Adams watched them. He had been talking to George when they came in. I'll have the roast pork tenderloin with an apple sauce and mashed potatoes, the first man said. It isn't ready yet. What the hell did you put on the cob for? That's the dinner, George explained. You get that at 6 o'clock. George looked at the clock on the wall behind the counter. It's 5 o'clock. Clock says 20 minutes past 5, the second man said. It's 20 minutes fast. Oh, to hell with the clock, the first man said. Well, you gotta eat. I can give you any kind of sandwiches, George said. You can have ham and eggs, bacon and eggs, liver and bacon, or a steak. Give me a chicken croquet with green peas and cream sauce and mashed potatoes. That's the dinner. Everything we want's the dinner, huh? That's the way you work it. I can give you ham and eggs, bacon and eggs, liver. I'll take the ham and eggs, the man called. Al said. He wore a derby hat and a black overcoat buttoned across his chest. His face was small and white, and he had tight lips. He wore a silk muffler and gloves. Give me bacon and eggs, said the other man. He was about the same size as Al. Their faces were different, but they were dressed like twins. Both wore overcoats too tight for them. They sat leaning forward, their elbows on the counter. Got anything to drink? Al asked. Silver beer, Bevo, ginger ale. George said, I mean, you got anything to drink? Just those I said. This is a hot town, said the other. What do they call it? Summit. Ever hear of it? Al asked his friend. No, the friend said. What do you do here nights? Al asked. They eat dinner, his friend said. They all come here and eat the big dinner. That's right, George said. So you think that's right? Al asked George. Sure. You're a pretty bright boy, aren't you? Sure, said George. Well, you're not, said the other man. Is he, Al? He's dumb, said Al. He turned to Nick. What's your name? Adams. Another bright boy, Al said. He's a bright boy, ain't he, Max? Town's full of bright boys, Max said. George put 2 platters, one of ham and eggs, one with a side of bacon and eggs on the counter. He sat down 2 dishes of fried potatoes and closed the wicket in the kitchen. Which is yours? He asked Al. Don't you remember? Ham and eggs. That's a bright boy, Max said. He leaned forward and took the ham and eggs. Both men ate with their gloves on. George watched the meat. What are you looking at? Max looked at George. Nothing. The hell you were. You were looking at me. Maybe the boy meant it for a joke, Max, Al said. George laughed. You don't have to laugh, Max said to him. You don't have to laugh at all, see? It's all right, George said. Oh, so he thinks it's all right. Max turned out. He thinks it's all right. That's a good one. Oh, he's a thinker, Al said, and they went on eating. What's that bright boy's name down the counter? Al asked Max. Hey, bright boy, Max said to Nick. You go around on the other side of the counter with your friend. What's the idea? Nick asked. There isn't any idea. You better go around, bright boy, Al said. Nick went around the counter. What's the idea? George asked. None of your damn business, said Al. Who's out in the kitchen? The cook. What do you mean the cook? I mean the guy that cooks. Tell him to come in. What's the idea? Tell him to come in. Where do you think you are? We know damn well where we are, the man called Max said. Do we look silly? You talk silly, Al said to him. What the hell do you argue with this kid for? Listen, he said to George. Tell that cook to come out here. What are you going to do to him? Nothing. Use your head, bright boy. What will we do to a cook? George opened the slit that opened back into the kitchen. Sam, he called, come here a minute. The door opened in the kitchen, and the cook came in. What was it? He asked. The 2 men at the counter took a look at him. All right, cook, you stand there, Al said. Sam, the cook, standing in his apron, looked at the 2 men sitting at the counter. Yes, sir, he said. Al got down from the stool. I'm going to go back to the kitchen and see what the cook and the bright boy, he said. Go on back to the kitchen, cook. You go with him, bright boy. The little man walked after Nick and Sam, the cook, back into the kitchen. The door shut after them. The man called Max sat at the counter opposite George. He didn't look at George, but looked in the mirror and ran along back to the counter. Henry's had been made over from the saloon into a lunch counter. Well, bright boy, Max said, looking into the mirror, why don't you say something? What's it all about? Hey, Al, Max called. Bright boy wants to know what it's all about. Why don't you tell him then? Al's voice came from the kitchen. What do you think it's all about? I don't know. What do you think? Max looked in the mirror all the time he was talking. I wouldn't say. Hey Al, bright boy says he wouldn't say what he thinks he's talking about. I can hear you all right, Al said from the kitchen. He had propped open the slit that the dishes passed through into the kitchen with the ketchup bottle. Listen, bright boy, he said from the kitchen to George. Stand a little further along the bar. You move a little to the left, Max. He was like a photographer arranging for a booth photo. Talk to me, bright boy, Max says. What do you think's gonna happen? George didn't say anything. I'll tell you, Max said. We're gonna kill a Swede. Do you know a big old Swede named Anderson? Yes. He comes here and eats every night, don't he? And sometimes he comes here. He comes here at 6 o'clock, don't he? If he comes. We all know that, bright boy, Max said. Talk about something else. Ever go to the movies? Once in a while. You want to go to the movies more. The movies are fine for a bright boy like you. Well, what are you going to kill old Anderson for? What did he ever do to you? He never had a chance to do anything to us. He never even seen us. He's only going to see us once, Al said from the kitchen. Well, what are you going to kill him for then? George asked. We're killing him for a friend, just to oblige a friend, bright boy. Shut up, Al said from the kitchen. You talk too goddamn much. Well, I gotta keep the bright boy amused, don't I? Bright boy. You talk too damn much, Al said. The cook and my bright boy are amused by themselves. I got them tied up like a couple of Goya friends in the convent. I suppose you were in a convent. You never know. You were in a kosher convent. That's where you were. George looked up at the clock. If anybody comes in, you tell them the cook is off. And if they keep after it, you tell them you'll go back and cook yourself. Oh. If anybody comes in, you tell them the cook is off. And if you keep after it, you tell them you'll go back and cook yourself. You got that, bright boy? All right, George says. What are you going to do with us afterward? That'll depend, Max said. That's one of those things you never know at the time. George looked up at the clock. It was 6:15. The door from the street opened. A streetcar motorman came in. Hello, George, he said. Can I get a supper? Sam's gone out, George said. He'll be back in about half an hour. I'd better go up the street, the motorman said. George looked at the clock. It was 6:20. That was nice, bright boy, Max said. You're a regular little gentleman. He knew I'd blow his head off, Al said from the kitchen. Nah, Max said. That ain't it. Bright boy is nice. He's a nice boy. I like him. At 6:55, George said, he's not coming. Two other people had been in the lunchroom. Once George had gone out to the kitchen and made up a ham and egg sandwich to go that a man wanted to take with him. Inside the kitchen he saw Al, his derby hat tipped back, sitting on the stool beside the wicket with the muzzle of a sawed-up shotgun resting on the ledge. Nick and the cook were back-to-back on the corner, the towel tied in each of their mouths. George had cooked the sandwich, wrapped it up in oiled paper, put it in a bag, brought it in, and the man had paid for it and gone out. Bright boy can do everything, Max said. He can cook in everything. You'd make some Goyle a nice wife, boy. Yes, George said. Your friend, old Anderson, isn't going to come. We'll give him 10 more minutes, Max said. Max watched the mirror in the clock. The hands of the clock marked 7 o'clock, then 5 minutes past 7. Come on, Al, said Max. We better go. He's not coming. Better give him 5 minutes, Al said from the kitchen. In 5 minutes, a man came in and George explained that the cook was sick. Why the hell don't you get another cook? The man said. Aren't you running a lunch counter? He went out. Come on, Al, Max said. What about the two bright boys and the cook? They're all right. You think so? Sure, we're through with it. I don't like it, said Al. It's sloppy. You talk too much. Ah, what the hell, said Max. We gotta keep amused, haven't we? You talk too much all the same, Al said. He came out from the kitchen. The cut-off barrels of the shotgun made a slight bulge under the waist of his too tight-fitting overcoat. He straightened his coat with his gloved hands. So long, bright boy, he said to George. You got a lot of luck. That's the truth, Max said. You ought to play the races, bright boy. The two of them went out the door. George watched them through the window, pass under the arc light, and cross the street. In their tight overcoats and derby hats, they looked like a vaudeville team. George went back through, swinging in the kitchen. Untied Nick in the cook. I don't want any more of that, said Sam the cook. I really don't want any more of that. Nick stood up. He never had a towel in his mouth before. Say, he said, what the hell? He was trying to swagger it off. They were going to kill old Anderson, George said. They were going to shoot him when he came in to eat. Old Anderson? Sure. The corners of his mouth. The cook felt the corners of his mouth with his thumbs. They all gone? He asked. Yeah, said George, they're gone now. I don't like it, said the cook. I don't like any of it. Listen, George said to Nick, you better go see old Anderson. All right. You better not have anything to do with it all. Sam the cook said, you better stay way out of it. Don't go if you don't want to, George said. Mixing up in this ain't gonna get you anywhere, the cook said. You stay out of it. I'll go see him, Nick said to George. Where does he live? The cook turned away. Little boys always know what they want to do, he said. He lives up in Hirsch's rooming house, George said to Nick. I'll go up there. Outside, the arc light shone through the branches of the tree. Nick walked up the street beside the car tracks and turned at the next arc light down a side street. 3 houses up the street was Hirsch's rooming house. Nick walked up the steps and pushed the bell. The woman came to the door. Is old Anderson here? They want to see him. Yes, if he's in. Nick followed the woman up a flight of stairs and back to the end of the corridor. She knocked on the door. Who is it? Somebody to see you, Mr. Anderson, the woman said. It's Nick Adams. Come in. Nick opened the door and went into the room. Old Anderson was lying on the bed with all his clothes on. He had been a heavyweight prize fighter and was too long for the bed. He lay with his head on 2 pillows. He did not look at Nick. What was it? He asked. I was at Henry's, Nick said. The 2 fellows came in and tied me up in the cook, and they were going to kill you. It sounded silly when he said it. Old Anderson said nothing. They put us in the kitchen, Nick went on. They were going to shoot you when you came in to supper. Old Anderson looked at the wall and did not say anything. George thought I'd better come and tell you about it. There isn't anything. I tell you what they were like. I don't want to know what they were like, old Anderson said. He looked at the wall. Thanks for coming to tell me about it. That's all right. Nick looked at the big man lying on the bed. Don't you want me to go and see the police? No, old Anderson said. That wouldn't do any good. Isn't there something I could do? No, there isn't anything to do. Maybe it was just a bluff. No, it ain't just a bluff. Old Anderson rolled over toward the wall. The only thing is, he said, talking toward the wall, I just couldn't make up my mind to go out. I've been in here all day. Couldn't you get out of town? No, old Anderson said. I was through with all the running around. He looked at the window. There ain't anything to do now? Couldn't you fix it up in some way? No, I got it all wrong. He talked with the same fat voice. There ain't anything to do. After a fire, I'll make up my mind and go out. I better go back and see George, Nick said. So long, said old Anderson. He did not look toward Nick. Thanks for coming around. Nick went out and he shut the door. He saw old Anderson with all his clothes on, lying in the bed, looking at the wall.
He's been in the room all day,
The landlady said downstairs.
I guess he don't feel well. I said to him, Mr. Anderson, you ought to go out and take your walk on your stroll down the office. I think he feels like it.
He doesn't want to go out,
I'm sorry he don't feel well.
the woman said.
He's an awfully nice man. He was in the ring, you know.
I know it,
You never know it except from the way his face is.
the woman said. They stood talking just inside the street door.
He's just so gentle.
Good night, Mrs. Hirsch, Nick said.
I'm not Mrs. H.
The woman said.
She owns the place. What did you look up there for? I'm Mrs. Bell.
Well, good night, Mrs. Bell, Nick said.
Good night.
The woman said. Nick walked down the dark street corner to the arc light and along the car tracks to Henry's eating house. George was inside, back of the counter. Did you see old? Yes, Nick said. He's a man in his room and he won't go out. The cook opened up the door from the kitchen and heard Nick's voice. I don't even listen to it, he said, and he shut the door. Did you go tell him about it? George asked. Sure, I told him, but he knows what it's all about. What's he gonna do? Nothing. They'll kill him. I guess they will. He must have got mixed up in something in Chicago. I guess so, said Nick. It's a hell of a thing. It's an awful thing, Nick said. They didn't say anything. George reached down for a towel and wiped the counter. I wonder what he did, Nick said. Double-crossed somebody. That's what they killed him for. I'm going to get out of this town, Nick said. Yeah, said George. That's a good thing to do. I can't stand to think about what's waiting in the room, and I'm knowing he's going to get it. It's just too damned awful. Well, said George, you'd better not think about it. Don't forget to hit that like button. Against the world. G been putting in work all night. Yeah, I feel like you've been tapped out for a minute. I could potentially do one of these other shorter ones because I got a couple real short ones, like 6 pages. I don't want to push it. We out of cigars. Big shouts out to Against the World. G. Out here putting in work on the stream. We in the building, y'all. Full Faith NFA gang. Shouts out to the r/alternate history hub Discord and alternate history hub in general. Yesterday was their birthday, and we tried to do a live read, but my power went out. Woo! So we do a live readings now. Turn up for Hemingway. Hemingway, turn up, turn up. Hemingway. Yeah. So I guess I'm ready to sign off if you're done. Cause you seem like you're tap now, and just force you into another short.